So who understands frames per second on your GoPro? Hey, this is Meredith from vidpromom.com, and I am not super good at math, but I think I have frames per second figured out, and I know the difference between 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second, 120, 240 frames per second, but what does all of that mean to you? Basically, videos that you're gonna see on YouTube or even on the television are probably going to be 30 frames per second. That means you're seeing a picture 30 times every second. So when you're editing your video, you want to try to keep all of your edits at 30 frames per second, ideally. So if you are shooting something that is very fast paced, that you know that you're going to want to do some slow motion on when you are editing your footage, then you want to shoot at a higher frame rate. Now, I usually don't put mine on anything above 60 frames per second, and most of the time I just keep it on 30, but if I know that I'm going to be slowing something down, if the kids are doing something fast-paced, or if they're, kicking the soccer ball around, then I might want to slow that down or just have some fun with it, which I'll show you in just a second. But I would shoot that at 60 frames per second, and then I can slow it down by half and still be at 30 frames per second. Does that make sense? So you can still slow down your footage. If you shot it at 30 frames per second, you can still put it in slow motion when you're editing. It's really not that big of a deal. It's just that it may not be as smooth, and you might see it might just be a little more jaggy. And usually you want to try to avoid that. But if you're just making a regular home movie, then who cares? Just have fun with it. So I'm going to show you on my computer the difference between shooting at 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second, and then slowing it down, and then we'll play with the flux feature in GoPro Studio as well. I have a few clips left over from the last video that I did, which was kind of an intro to slow motion and how to make your GoPro videos into sick edits. So you'll have to check that out if you want to see what I mean there. But we're going to compare 30 frames per second with 60 frames per second. And what I have is my daughter kicking around the soccer ball in the backyard. So this clip right here is 60 frames per second. And the second clip here is 30 frames per second. And I honestly don't know what we're going to be able to tell by comparing these two, but we will figure it out. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to find a good spot to slow it down, maybe like right there. So I'm going to do a little razor tool, and I'm going to take and I'm going to put this at like 30%, okay? So the ball is slowed down by 30%. Now over here, we will do a similar thing. We'll cut it. I'm going to cut it right there, and then I'm going to take this and slow it down to 30%. So honestly, I don't know if we can tell the difference. But the 60 frame per second clip, which is that one, should be a little bit more clear and a little more sort of real feeling than this one here, which is 30 frames per second. So I don't know. To me, it looks a little bit like it looks a little better at 60 frames per second. It feels it just feels more real. It feels like it doesn't feel like I just took the footage and slowed it down. It feels a little more smooth. And that's what it's supposed to do. So like I already explained, for the most part, I keep my footage at 30 frames per second because I don't slow things down a whole lot. We just don't do any sort of extreme sports. But if I need to, or if I want to, you can use this feature in GoPro Studio called Flux, which it's already checked, so it probably is checked in your program by default as well. And what Flux does is it sort of interpolates the frames that are essentially missing. So if you are shooting at 30 frames per second and then you put it in GoPro Studio and then you slow it down, then it's not really at 30 frames per second anymore, right? So because you slowed it down, Flux kind of interpolates or guesses what is missing between each frame, and it sort of smooths things out a little bit for you. And it's built into GoPro Studio. It's probably already checked by default, and you can play with it a little bit. So get out there and play with your GoPro, change the frames per second, and then bring them into GoPro Studio and see what you can do with them. I think the best piece of advice for you will be if you know that you're going to want to slow things down and make your GoPro edit super sick, then definitely shoot at a higher frame rate. But it is going to make your file sizes bigger. It's going to make your editing time a little bit slower, because when you bring things into GoPro Studio, they have to be converted. And the more frames that you have to convert, the longer it's going to take. It's really as simple as that. So that is the main reason why I shoot at 1080 at 30 frames per second, because I'm still shooting in HD. It's still a great picture, a good quality picture, but I'm not doing any crazy editing. So there's really no point in me having increased file sizes. And it's really frustrating, actually, to deal with increased file sizes. So play with your camera and play with GoPro Studio, and that sort of wraps up my little lesson in frames per second. So I'll be doing a bunch more videos where I deep dive into the features and all the fun stuff that you can do with GoPro Studio. So definitely subscribe to this channel, and also hop onto my email list at vidpromom.com, and I'll actually send you a 3-minute crash course into getting started with creating awesome home movies. So I would love to have you in the VidProMom family if you head on over to vidpromom.com and give me your email address so that you don't miss any of the videos and posts that I do with tips, tricks, tutorials, and maybe some giveaways every now and then. So vidpromom.com, I'll see you there, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Thanks, bye.